But when people came in to lift everything we had on Z100, there was so much phonetic magic involved. From the top of the Empire State Building.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Welcome to another edition of For the Record. And going on For the Record, I'm your Duke, Dave Sholin, along with my co-host, Rick Basiglia. And we have,
It's big.
well, it's a hashtag legend. I could go through the career, but come on. I think he's in every Hall of Fame that has been created, including being named Programmer of the Century by Radio and Records, and along with that, in the NAB Hall of Fame, the National Association of Broadcasters, and that would be Super Shan.
Whoa!
Scott Shannon, welcome. For the Record. We're going to put this for the record so you can be clearing up any of this crazy stuff that has been going on in your career.
Well, first of all, I got a question for you guys. Why in the world will you take three washed out, beat up old radio guys and try to talk to young people to tell them how to do it?
Well, we could get into that actually, but I think a lot of it is because some of these stories, I keep hearing these podcasts, no one tells what really happened. And that's kind of what put Dave and I into it. And there is a lot of younger people want to hear these stories. We're finding out a lot of our audience is under 40. Like that's young.
Well, that's young by today's standards.
True.
But what's so funny about it is we went through a period that we were all fortunate enough to be a part of radio when radio was an art, not a business. And, especially if you were in programming, you actually were an artist. You had things to do, but you could do it different ways and have different outcomes. And it was a great time to be in radio. I'm so happy that I got in before. If I was just getting out now, it wouldn't be good.
That brings me to the first question I wrote down, and then we'll kind of go with the flow. I've seen your interviews before, Scott, as you rarely do, and
Not
to
many.
do it for doing it for us. I don't know what you said. Yes, and we're thrilled. But the one thing you've always said, you talk about preparation, concentration, and moderation.
Right.
And you've always had that in the booth for your DJs. And who were you? Why did you do that? Who thought of it? Where did it come up
I
from?
didn't think of it, but I was the first of my generation to use it. I really never had a mentor or someone that would help me or develop. I don't have anybody to thank for my success except for three people, and that would be Bill Drake, Robert W. Morgan, and Don Steele. I was a KHJ freak, and a lot of people who are probably watching this or listening to this or whatever never even heard of that station. But Bill,
I used to be a phone turkey there.
No kidding.
Back in the day, yeah.
Guys, Napoleon used to call you up.
No, we didn't talk like that.
The real reason you love KHJ was Rick Basiglia, of course.
Right.
That was it. Well,
I used to go.
Well, no, but I just long before I was ever in radio, I was a music fan. I loved music before I loved radio. I discovered rock and roll music pretty early in my life. And we didn't have a lot of money. My dad was a master sergeant in the Army. And, back then, you don't know it when you're a kid. You don't know you're poor. You don't care either. But if I wanted to get something, I had to get a job. And I worked I had a paper route, long paper route. And then I would pedal my Schwinn on Saturday down to the record store, the electronic store with a record section. And I would buy one or two, maybe three if I had a good week, 45s. I was obsessed with the 45 RPM, and that led to radio. And I, my, I guess, constructive years or my learning years were in Indiana. My dad was stationed at a place in outside of Indianapolis called Fort Benjamin Harrison. And I would listen to all the radio stations in the area. There was one, and I would actually try to be like a judge or a critic of these stations. I'd say, well, that guy, it sounds like he's an old fart. You know, that guy's too old to be on a top 40 playing Elvis and whoever. That there were no Beatles when I started. And I mean, obviously, I got on the radio after the Beatles, but I mean, the rock and roll music back then was Bobby Rydell and Fabian and those kind of people. But nevertheless, I would pay more attention to the way the disc jockeys talked and what they said and things like that. And then one day a news station came on in the market, and it was so great. What is this? I never heard a station sign on the air and just start from scratch. And it was owned by a guy out of the great Northwest who later lost his damn license. But he was the first guy to use names like Coil Radio, WIF,
All right.
wife. And he went around the country. Kissin, KISN was one of his. And they didn't know anything about Drake. There was no Bill Drake yet.
I was
But-
Don Burden. I was Don Burden, right?
Certainly was Don Burden. And I've got a whole book. I studied everything I could about that radio station, WIFE, and how it took over from a 50,000 watt station that had a crappy program director and crappy DJs. I was so happy to hear a new station coming. And I said, now even then, I'm a kid, and I go, that's the way it's supposed to be. Not the idiots over at WIBC. They didn't know. They didn't change anything. And I think it was 6 months, it was over for nobody listened to them anymore. All the kids were on WIFE. And I watched that and made notes about it. And I would go down to the record store, and they would sell Billboard magazines. They would be a little bit old. I'd read the Billboard magazine. And I was one of those guys that was very, very shy, and I wouldn't dare speak to a hot girl unless another girl told me she kind of likes you. And then I, oh, really? I better talk to her. But I didn't. I just couldn't take someone. Get away from me, will you? You know, a reject. I just didn't want to be a reject. So I was just kind of a very shy guy, and I saw this picture in Billboard magazine of this guy I think it was in some small market in Kansas, and he had a little room and a microphone. That's the first time I ever saw a picture of a radio station. I said, that guy's sitting in there by himself. He doesn't have to deal with any jerks or anything. He's got a microphone. He's talking to people, saying things. I could do that. I'd like to do that. That's fun. And you don't have to mingle with people. And it just hit me. And then later on, when Wife signed on, they had a window on the world. And I used to get my mother to drop me off in front of the radio station because that was right on the way to go downtown and shop in some of the big stores. So I'd stand there and just look inside at the DJ world. So they'd take the 45s and they'd spin through them, and they'd pick the ones they won. They'd put it on the turntable, and they answered the phones. And sometimes they had a night guy named Joe Light. And Joe used to come outside at nighttime and talk to a car full of girls. I saw that. I went, that looks pretty interesting there. And then he had to run back inside and put another record on. But just everything about that whole, I studied everything. I looked at how they put the record on the turntable, and they'd turn it around a little bit like this and get it all queued up. And sometimes a guy would hold it while he was talking and then take his finger off and let it go. So That's
Man,
that's that's how I got started.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you tell these stories, and I'm going, man. I'm seeing my life flash before me because you're getting on a Schwinn bike. I think I had a something called a Hiawatha, but I was on a bike
You were
riding over to
you got a
WT Grant store in Redwood City, California, listening to the very first top 40 in the Bay Area, KOBY. My dad took me over to this station, and I would stand there and just look. It was a big deal coming to San Francisco. Stood there, and he was ready to go. He says, "Okay, we've been there for about an hour." He says, "You want?"
no,
I goes, "I can't leave. I'm just stuck here." He couldn't. He didn't get it. He goes, "What
I'm
are you
still
doing?"
watching. I'm still
Yeah,
watching, Dad.
I'm
Hold on.
watching. Yep. Yeah, exactly the same. But you and I have these connections that you may not know. But when I was doing a little homework on the Scott Shannon, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg. I did not know you were there, but I was there a few years after you. I don't know
Oh yeah,
what
yeah.
time frame you were there, but I was there a few years after you. Then, do you remember the very first time that I remember you and I speaking with each other where you were? Because I sure do.
You
Just
got
going to
me.
test
Yeah, I think he's stumped.
Nashville, Tennessee,
Right.
WMAK. You'd called me. I was in San Jose, a baby DJ and music director at KLIV. And oddly enough, when I looked up WMAK, you were at 1570,
No,
wasn't that?
the wrong page.
Oh, I thought it was 1570. They must have moved. Where was
1300.
WMAK? Was in Nashville. I know that.
Oh yeah, you got the city right. Yeah, right.
What was the frequency?
1300.
Oh, they moved it. It's now, I guess,
Now you move.
supposedly changed call letters. Who knows? But we were still, at the end of the AM dial. If you were at 13, I was at 15, and you had called me, and we had a great conversation about music and all
Well,
of that. I remember it well.
but back then, Duke, you got to remember, all the R&B stations were down at the other end. They had the
Yep.
1580 and 1600, and
Yep.
they went about 8 blocks. That was the deal back then. But the thing about it is I lived and ate radio. And my father used to say, you know what, you're not going to ever be successful if you don't get something and, start thinking about a job you're going to have someday. Well, I'm thinking about that, Dad. He says, no, I mean a real job, not playing freaking records. And you bring up the fact that when I tell my story, uh, when I first started speaking at different conventions and things like that, so many guys and women would come up to me and say, "Oh my God, your story's my story. I
That's
started
it.
a little radio station in
Right.
my closet. I started a radio station in my basement."
Exactly.
It's just a thing. I guess we get bitten by it. And I never really cared about the showbiz end of it. You see people all the time, well, I wanted to meet chicks so I can answer the phone at night. And that's what nighttime disc jockeys do. But I tried to learn every aspect and every nook and cranny of radio. Like I remember reading about a disc jockey in Ohio. I won't get into who it was or what it was. And he was going out and had a relationship with a 16-year-old girl, and he
Oh boy.
wound up behind bars. And when you're at nighttime, and as far as I was concerned, I didn't want to do anything. But if they said, we got a job here, it's 6 to 10 or whatever it is, and can I have a longer shift? I wanted a longer shift. I wanted to work 7 to midnight. That's me. Super Shan was on
Right.
7 to midnight. And they said, okay. I would get to work. My first real job was in Mobile, Alabama, working for Bernie Debman at WABB 1470.
Go get him.
One of the legends. Yeah.
I used to go to work at noon. I'd get in there at noon, and see if they want me to drive the Radio Rover around with the tennis spotter on it, and or I took the surveys around and say, yeah, I'm over here on WMAK. What's your name? You know, and I go to work at noon. I wanted to know how they did the production. Remember when you first started, you'd get a instrumental album and you put it behind you and you cut the spot and then you had to cart it up and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. You know, when I worked in Mobile, the DJ on the overnight did the news for the morning guy. The morning guy did the news for the midday guy, and I would come in and do the news for the afternoon guy. And on and at night, I had to do my own headlines.
So it's making me think, if the way you guys grew up, being in your blood and 24/7, it was all you thought about. So today, to go back to what we were talking about, I don't know if we were recording them, but you would go from a small market to a medium market and hopefully to a large market. How's that going to happen anymore? Where are we never? I understand personalities and talk guides and podcasts, but there's not going to be disc jockeys that are stars anymore. It's crazy.
I think that's wrong. I think that disc jockeys will continue to be stars. However,
How are they going to get there?
most radio stars, as you put it, most radio stars actually started on the night shift.
I see.
So the problem was when you did the night shift, you were in your learning, you were in your embryo stages. People forget that we had to learn how to run the board. We actually ran the board and we had to record commercials and we had to do production. You had to do personal events all over the town, which I loved it. But the problem now is nighttime radio is suffering more than any other thing. There's a lot of successful morning shows in America. They're certainly not making the money that a lot of them did back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. There's just a couple of people that are in that category, but there's still people listen to the radio. I get if I do slip up and agree to do an interview, somebody keeps pounding me. Yeah, we didn't. Who are you? You think you're too big to do this? No, I don't enjoy talking about it because they're going to ask me, well, where do you think radio's going now? What's the future?
Is that kind of what that's what I just did.
Well, yeah, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know any better.
Learning on the spot.
Nobody knows where it's going. It's not going up. It's not, it takes stages. Sometimes it goes down. I mean, you see all these great morning show guys, small markets, medium markets, large markets, you notice they're retiring. Because when a new hedge fund company takes over a chain of radio stations, they get the stats. They're looking over who's making what, and they really don't look at what they do. They look at one thing: how much are they making? We got to get rid of that person right there. Well, that's our number one DJ. I don't care. Get him out of here. That's a lot of that's going on. It's sad, and if you can still get into radio, I see every week there's a new syndicated radio show with a DJ and a female sidekick that you never heard of. Now they're on 12 stations. Probably
it's okay.
Yeah, probably getting $80 a station a week, something like that. And there's a few good shows still in the market. But I will go back, I'll regress for a second. When I first started in Mobile, had two, when I was in the Army and I worked part-time in North Carolina, and I worked part-time, and they transferred me, so I worked part-time in Columbus, Georgia. WCLS, 1580 AM. We were actually in Phoenix City. But I used to go, when I was a kid in Indianapolis, you could listen to WLS. which was the big 89.
Yeah.
So we were WCLS. So when I was a baby DJ and I'm going WCLS. I was act like I was on WCLS.
That's fun.
WCLS. The old guy who owned Charlie, the guy who owned WCLS, said, you know, you need to learn how to pronounce the call letters a little bit better. You're leaving out the C. I said, does it sound like that? Oh, no. WCLS would do that. But what I did was, when I was in Mobile, my first real job, I think I bought it at a Kmart. It's not even in business anymore. It was a plastic briefcase, and I think it's like $10. And then I took there's a second page in Broadcast Magazine had a list of all the radio markets in the country. I went New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. And what I did was I taped that inside the back of my briefcase. I scotch taped it in there. And my plan was I looked at Mobile and they were market number, I don't know, 99, 98, and I would put a circle around that. And then I looked, I wanted to keep going up, 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 up till I either got to LA or New York. And that's just like what you were talking about. It's just like being in baseball.
Right.
Start off in a Class C team somewhere in Podunk, Louisiana, and then you move up a little bit to a B team, then an A team, then a AAA, and pretty soon you get to go to the show. That's what they call it. You get to go to the show, and that's the same way with radio. Now these days, people figured out a new way to do that. You went to the big market and you started in the station doing, driving the prize mobile or maybe answering phones or whatever. And these days you can wind up, they don't have to pay the dues anymore. Well, they pay the dues, but they're still living at home with their mom outside of New York or outside of Chicago or wherever. You see more and more people. I had a kid that worked for me at CBS FM, great guy. He was driving the van around, and I said, why don't you come in and work with me in the morning? Now he's Jim Kerr's sidekick.
Wow. You always seem to, when you created Z1, the zoo, watching the documentary, you always picked people intuitively and instinctively and put those teams together.
Totally. How did that concept come about? Because everybody, I can't say everybody, but you started the zoo, and then the zoos were popping up everywhere. Where did that idea? Did it just? Were you laying in bed one night? Go, this is a great idea. Just get a bunch of.
No, I really was not a morning man. I didn't start out. I did nights, and then when I got to be a program director in Nashville, to your point, I had to do afternoon drive, and I had to talk. When I was a DJ at night, I had some cards, and I didn't have any imagination. I didn't understand how to be a personality, but I wanted to learn. So when I got in afternoons, because what I had was with the little cards, I would just have a bunch of slogans that I heard on my air checks, as I had air checks from all over the country, and other things that I thought of myself, and I would just repeat the same stuff on the cards. That song's so great, it makes me want to eat the flowers off the wallpaper. Scott Shannon is on the radio, the fastest mouth in the sound. I just regurgitated the whole crap over and over. For a guy, I never graduated from high school, let alone set foot on a college campus. I would drive, maybe I drove through one once, I don't know. But, and so then when I went to work in the afternoon, what I did was I would make myself talk. I did a lot of prep before I went on, and I would take one break an hour and just talk, just say something other than just a riffraff. rather than the slogans or things that I had that I used all the time. Super Shan's on the air everywhere, blah, 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 like that. And then I finally wanted to learn how to talk. And I would used to when I would get off to go home, I would hear a station out of Cleveland, WKYC, and there was a disc jockey on there his name was Jack Armstrong. And he talked so fast you couldn't even understand what he was saying, but it was fascinating.
Right.
And that was kind of an inspiration. And then after he was off, another guy came on at midnight on this 50,000 watt station, and his name was Jim LaBarber. He's not as famous. He wasn't as well known but he would just talk to you like a regular guy. And another guy named Dick Summer. He was the same guy as LaBarber, same type of disc jockey. They would actually talk to you like I'm sitting here talking to you. They didn't have any slogans and like that. But Big Jack Armstrong, man, that guy he was awesome. But it was just frantic.
So Dave's question about the whole zoo concept.
Did I skip that answer?
It's okay because the other story was awesome.
Well, the actual zoo, what happens it's not a long story, but it's a good story. I got fired from WPGC. And I didn't mind it because the general manager was a college roommate of the guy who owned WPGC. Dick Marriott was his name. They also were in the hotel business.
Yeah.
So he put this guy in there, and he said, you're in charge here. All right, I don't know anything about radio. Don't worry about it. It's not that hard. So I was over at my friend Steve Kingston's house. We were watching Monday Night Football. We might have had a little smoke going on there. And so finally I said, I better get home before I can't drive. I got to go. So I get home, and I'm falling asleep, and my phone rings, and it's Kingston. What are you doing? He says, oh, my God, you got the TV on? I said, no, I got to get up in the morning. And he said, John Lennon just got murdered. I'm trying to sleep. I don't need any of your stupid jokes when I'm trying to sleep. He said, no. Howard Cosell just announced it. So I got up, and keep in mind, this guy he wouldn't let me on the air. I was just a program director. So I'm about ready to go. He said, you're not going to ever make it as a disc jockey.
That's good.
I already kind of have made it as a disc jockey. So he's not on you don't meet my standards. So we went in that morning. I was working with this great morning show, and it was Elliott and Woodside, and I produced the show that morning for them. I had a bunch of stuff at home, some interviews with Lennon and things, so I brought it, and I was producing the morning show, and we were taking calls and playing all Beatles songs. So the hotline rings, and it's this jackass manager, and he goes, what are you doing? What do you mean, what am I doing? Why are you playing all those Beatle records? We're not a Beatles station. I said, he doesn't know. I said, sir, John Lennon was murdered last night. I know that. Of course, he's murdered, but you're overreacting. Get back to the format. Hung up on me. So, he said we got to get him. His name was Glenn Potter. Say his name. Glenn
Good.
Potter. Whew. Anyway, I said to Jim, I said, I guess we got to go back to a regular format. He goes, what? And he said, we got to go back to the regular format. Mr. Potter says we're overreacting. So wait about 7 or 8 days. I walk in the station, and I'm still pissed off about what happened. And I go through the secretary. He said, was Mr. Potter, if you have an appointment with him? I said, no, you sit right there. I'll be right back. And I go in and I say, Mr. Potter, you got to get on the phone. And I laid down a People magazine, a Newsweek magazine, and a Time magazine. And I said, Mr. Potter, you got to get on the phone. Look at all these people that overreacted. So, about 10 days later, he fired me. And we were number one with a 12.2 share out the door.
Wow.
So that long about that time, I'd met a young lady that I kind of liked. And unfortunately, no one in radio in DC knew who I was, my name, even though we were number one, I wasn't on the air. So I figured out the trick. If you want to get fired, if you were a morning man, you can go across the street and kick their ass. But nobody knew. I can't go across the street. Nobody's going to hire a program director like that, unless you know it. So I got no job, but I decided I'm going to be a morning man. I'm going to learn how to do mornings.
Wow.
That's exactly why I became a morning man. Glenn Potter drove me to it. He's still alive, by the way. And I guess.
We'll send him a copy.
Yeah, sure. So I go to, I have, believe it or not, I had a good reputation, a pretty good reputation, have gun, will travel kind of PD at that time, because wherever I went, I had a number one station. So it's kind of coincidental. So I had 3-4 solid offers and good markets, good size. I won't bore you with where, but I wanted to do mornings. So I wanted a show where I could be the PD and be the morning man. So I got a call from Tampa, Florida. And their station had just been knocked off by a new Bill Tanner station. Bill Tanner's is one of the best, I think, program directors to come along in a long, long time. Bless his soul. But they went from like number one or number two down to number 10 or 12. And I talked to the GM and I said, I'd like to come there. I've heard Tampa's a nice place to be. And he said, well, yeah, we'd like to have you, but you got to get here quick. I said, well, I'm available. And I said, well, would you be all right if I did the morning show? Because I want to. And he said, well, you've done it before. I said, no, but I'll figure it out. Don't worry about that. So they already had a morning show. His name was Cleveland Wheeler. Pretty great, funny guy. Had a great laugh, which I think is important with a morning show. You got to have somebody on there that really laughs and has a contagious laugh. Just ask Bob and Tom about that; they'll tell you. And so anyway, I go there and I got a hotel room at the airport in Tampa, and I called up the morning guy, Cleveland Williams. I said, "You want to come by and talk to me?" And he said, well, if you're going to fire me, you can do it over the phone. I don't want to come in there to the airport and talk to you and get fired there. I said, no, I'm not going to fire you. I just want to talk to you. So he came up there and I said, I got an idea for a morning show and I want to see if you're interested. He said, well, you've never done mornings before. That's why I like you. You have done mornings before. So anyway, I described it to him and we were looking for a name and he had a lot to do with it because he wasn't sure he wanted to stay. And I said, I want to do a concept. I want to take, I said, have you ever heard of, what's the guy's name that did mornings in Chicago for years, the Breakfast Club? It was the original Breakfast Club. It was a syndicated ABC show. And he had a band. They would play a band was, music, and they would interview people. And my dad used to listen to it when I was in the back seat, and I thought it was kind of cool. They just talked. And I said, I want to do a hybrid of that and Saturday Night Live. I want to put those together and have comedy, and I want to interview people that I'm wanting to find people in the community who are interesting. There's people and every day they're not in radio, but they're just funny, naturally
Right.
irritating. They're funny. Every city, I don't care what town you're in, there's always somebody that people like to hang around. So he said, I think you got something. There's nobody doing that anywhere in Tampa. So, and I said, yeah, well, got to have a name for it. What about Cleveland and Scott? He said, or Scott. I didn't say anything, so he said, or Scott and Cleveland. He said, no, we got to have an umbrella name, something good. Like Breakfast Club. I want to be like the Breakfast Club guy. And so I think I came up with, I said, what about, we were just doodling. We had a fifth Canadian club. We ordered lunch up there. We're having a good time, just getting to know each other. And so finally, I wrote ZOO and Q and Zoo rhyme. I thought that'd be great. I'm a big student of phonetic magic.
Well, I mean, think of this. Comes out of your brain from worst to first. Same kind of thing. That's crazy.
If you go back and you look at some of the people that work for me that hated the name that I gave them, but when they left my employ, they kept it. I hope, I can't wait to get out of here because I'm gonna go back to my real name. Nobody ever did. They all like it. And we had a lady that worked in D.C. and she was very very good friends with the general manager. And she wanted to do a Sunday morning show, and I wanted. She'd never even been on the radio. He said, "Do me a favor, put her on sometime in the morning." Okay, so I said, "You're going to be Stevie." Well, I already have a name. It's Margaret or whatever. No, Stevie. I want you to be Stevie. The worse the DJ, the better the name. That's how.
Man, I got that. I'm remembering that one.
The worse the DJ, the better the name, because you can, as long as they have a great name. Dr. Don Rose. I mean, he got ahead. He's a great morning guy, but he was still Dr. Don. People remember that.
Yeah.
And again, I forget which, and I always like to I like to give people names that are on the edge of celebrity. People, I know that name, but I don't remember who I had. Like Cat Summers. I had a guy named Cat Summers. Everybody call him Cat Stevens.
Yeah.
And so this girl finally married the GM, and she hated her name, but she's living with him now down somewhere. Oh, I know her, in Naples, and she's still Stevie. She still goes by Stevie, and she hated it when we gave it to her. She's very nice lady. But phonetic magic is so important to me. And I say this all the time. Great radio stations are built on a keyboard, because it used to be a typewriter. Now it's a keyboard. Because listen to, and all due respect, Rick Dees was a great morning guy, and they had some great program directors at Kiss FM. But when people wanted to imitate Kiss FM, what did they have to imitate? You can't steal the call letters. Well, you can. Rick Dees, you can't call yourself Rick Dees, already Rick Dees. But when people came in to lift everything we had on Z100, there was so much phonetic magic involved. From the top of the Empire State Building, or people say, well, you're New York. You're not in New York. Yeah, but we're on the Empire State Building.
That's all.
And we say, thundering through North America, this is the new Z100. And we had all kinds of, in the morning, when I used to say, You know, like Baby DJ, we had little kids come up and Baby DJs are all over the place. And if it's hard to have a conversation now without somebody, and if you talk to somebody in radio, without them dropping that Baby DJ thing, because you can visualize it, you know?
That's it. Is that it's those images, the images of the Empire State Building.
Right.
You you know where it is. It's you can get this picture in your mind, and that is exactly what Z100 did. The documentary that is on Amazon, and it's so great. But is there any? This is for the record, so we like to clear up anything.
That's a sort of,
Obviously,
oh,
anything. Was there anything in that documentary that you're thinking wasn't exactly right, or maybe a few things happened to, or pretty much was it accurate every step of the
yeah,
way?
yeah. I thought
It was.
the writer was great and the producer was great and the director. You know, if you look back at some of the things, eh, the jingle package that that I wrote with John from Jam. It was so funny because he's a keyboard player. He had one of those little tiny keyboards, and I would get on the phone with him. I said, and I want to make it sound a little bit like the old WABC 70s.
Oh, yeah.
WABC. So we did Z100 WHTZ. We had to change it just a little bit, but we always had transmitting from the worldwide mothership studios, all those little gimmicks and words and things like that. And it would just come to me when I'm driving into work. I get a lot of ideas when I'm driving. And you can actually take a radio station and just design it on a keyboard and change update the production a lot. You can actually have a really good radio station with not so good personalities. Now, it helps a lot if you have a good morning show personality, but that it's so important. Nobody gets it. But
And also, what
True.
was great because being friends with Michael Ellis, that you just hired Michael, and it was just he knew the hits. I mean, with you, obviously, it was tight. There was nothing. I grew up in New York that era. No one played the hits, and
yeah,
it was just
well,
incredible. It was just like boom.
you got to remember though, PLJ changed formats before we went on. But they didn't have any phonetic magic. They were still PLJ. It was still Jim Kerr in the morning. The processing was the same. When I build a station, I go back to the old Hollywood squares thing. You have all the squares, you have different people in there. And I used to have a little easel and I would go box and I would box jingles and then another box. And then I would blow that box up and get into that and worry about the details of it. And I would make sure we had the music. I would have
Right.
a music. The
It
most
was
important things, the music of the station. That's important. The image of the station has its own box. The morning show has its own box. The DJs have to all sound. I want the radio station to be unific. I'm not even sure that's a real effing word. It's got to be unific. They
And the
all
other piece is you gotta have you gotta have a signal because
that
how
helps.
many stations are actually pretty good stations, but if they can't hear you,
Let me
then
go back to Indianapolis for a second. WIBC had 50,000 watts clear channel all over the place. WIFE signed on at 1310. They were like, I think, 5,000 watts directional. You could barely pick them up in some areas outside of Indianapolis and some places in there. Guess what? The station sucked. WIFE crushed them in 6 months.
wow.
Back then, you could get away with a signal. There are some stations in America right now that do well, and they don't have the best signal in the market. I mean, Z100 signal was not. Well, when we were on later on, we were on about 2 years. Another station in Philadelphia came on our frequency and knocked down a lot of the people in certain parts of New Jersey. But it didn't bother the ratings because we just just changed it around. I think every day on that radio station, I would try to come up with something to talk about. One day we started this whole thing. Remember the "We Are the World" album? It was a fold open. We had a guy call and said, "Do you notice that LaToya Jackson's on one part of the fold, and then Michael Jackson's on? I think he's really her." So we got Dr. Dave, to call in, and he was a professor, and he would say he had this German accent. He was, I can tell you why. I know Michael Jackson is really LaToya Jackson. And he goes on and on. And they called me from, at that time, the big record stores were selling out of the "We Are the World" because there was a cut in the middle. The picture was spliced together, the album cover. So Michael was on one side and LaToya was on the other side. They couldn't have taken the picture together because they're the same person. We did a whole show on that.
That would have been, yeah, wow, I could see that.
There was another high point that we had, and it was at where MetLife Stadium is. There was a Bruce Springsteen concert. We used to always tease that Bruce Springsteen didn't like that. Once he got on stage, you had to pull him off like a James Brown thing, drag him off. And so it was a final show of, I think, a 12 or 18 concert series there. And I got some old bootleg Bruce albums, and I had them I brought them in from the production room. And what we did, we went on at 6 o'clock in the morning. We said, he's still playing over there. He's still on stage. He's still up there. So what we did was I had our our promotion director, Kenny Lane, go over. He went in the production room and said, "Kenny, go over there. I want you to see what's going on at the stadium." And it wasn't MetLife at the time. And he says, "All right." So he's remote, and I got him in the production room, and I'm playing. I got the bootleg album. Well, it doesn't sound like Bruce's regular album because it's a bootleg. He was live from Cleveland. And he said, "Oh my God, he's still on stage. Listen." And I said, what's terrible is all these people who left without, they gave up they can't go back. He's been playing all night long. It's 7:30 in the morning. And then we had another album, and it was just him playing and singing. And Kenny called back. He said, "Oh my God, the guys in the band are sleeping on the stage, and Bruce is still up there singing by himself." And he said, "There's only about 150 people left in here." So I kept it going. And finally, we got a call from the president of the building and said, "You got to stop what you're doing. People are trying to get back in our stadium in the grounds. We got the gates locked up and there's cars out." But I mean, that's the kind of thing that you can do without spending money.
Yeah.
But every day, and then people would talk about that. We'd talk about it the rest of the day on the station.
Right.
We had people calling in that were, tried to get back in. I can't believe, I talked to Scott Shannon about this one. He did blah, 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 blah. And then another one we did was when PLJ decided they were getting beat so bad, they were going to change the call letters. That it had been PLJ because we had just done a research project, and we found out that in the 5 boroughs, they were neck and neck with us, but outside Long Island, New Jersey, and all that, we were killing them. And so we came up with this idea that we found out that, but I forgot this part. The only thing that people grew up on PLJ. So that was what it was. Just like WABC still had numbers when they were not even top 40 anymore. People didn't even know it when they were talk radio. So what we did was we did on a Friday. We made an announcement at 8:00. I had a friend of mine who happened to work somewhere in Washington D.C. And I found out that WPLJ, just after we did this research, the most important thing about the station was the call letters. They announced they didn't announce it, but they registered new call letters with the FCC. They had to get them approved, and they were WWPR. They changed the whole image to Power Radio. So what we
I know you're going.
What we did was I went on at 8:00 and I said, well, I got to tell you, it's sad, very sad. We've been battling this thing with WPLJ all these years. And I always wanted to work in New York because PLJ is one of the greatest radio stations in America. And they decided to give up the fight. They're going to drop all contemporary music. They're going to change their call letters to WWPR. They're going to be worldwide Puerto Rican radio. And Ross goes, why is that? Well, why don't they do it now? Ross, come on. How many Puerto Rican Christmas songs do you think there are? It's December the 2nd. They're not going to go switch right now. They're going to do it in January when the Christmas is over. The next thing we had Dr. Dave. We called WUNI, a real Puerto Rican station in Puerto Rico, and he's going to be the new GM of WWPR, we said. And he's talking to me, and Scott, there's just not that many. There's never a Puerto Rican station in New York. We want to serve the Puerto Rican community. So the next thing that happened, we got a call from an agency lady that we know. She was the Coca-Cola. She had the whole Coca-Cola account. And she said, let me talk to Scott. Scott, this is Marilyn from so-and-so agency. Is that what you're saying? Is it true? Are they going Puerto Rican radio? I said, yes, ma'am. She says, oh, I got to get the schedule off that station. We've already got the Spanish community covered. So she hung up. Next thing I know, the general manager walks in at 9:15, and Dean Thacker, he says, you got to take it off. Take what off? That whole scam you're doing in there. And what he said, I just got a call from the law firm. They're going to sue us. The ABC lawyers are going to sue us for destroying the image of the station, and they're going to serve it if you're not off the air immediately. And so I said, all right, thank you. All right, bye. He said, well, wait a minute. And we just kept doing it. And then the next thing I know, wait a minute, at 9:45, the GM of WPLJ goes on the air with Jim Kerr and says, well, there are reports that we're going to drop the WW. What we're doing is going to be power. Nobody gave a damn. By that time, it was over. The whole scam, nobody was listening to him by that time. And then
that transition, you made PLJ into WCBS FM, but PLJ, for those who may not remember, was actually a hit song.
Yeah,
White Port and lemon juice. Every time I hear PLJ, I'm thinking White Port and lemon juice.
Everything I think of PLJ, I think of Scott's called it Wimp. What'd you call it, Wimpy Radio or something? And Larry.
That's right.
He called it W. You said WIMP.
Larry.
I remember
Larry.
Larry Booger.
I never met Larry Booger. I got to tell you.
You never met him?
Never met him. We had a record producer, a very talented record promotion guy. And he was friends with Larry. and he would go meet Larry at the station, and they would walk because PLJ was in the city, and they would go to dinner. So on this night, he had to stop, and he had to pick up his laundry, his dry cleaning at the Chinese, whatever it was. It was an Asian place that does his clothes and all that. So he said, I need to pick up for Larry a burger. And the guy says, you mean Larry Boogle?
The best.
The guy, the promotion guy started laughing. And it was like a burger said, shut up. So even the poor guy, and he called me that night from the restaurant where they were having dinner and said, you won't believe this what happened. Oh my God, he was furious.
I mean,
Oh,
you did that one for years.
Oh yeah. What we did was, I don't think I don't think you've ever heard this, but what we did was every morning when we got them on the run, I called them Wimp Radio because the reason was they were a rock station and they started playing Michael Jackson and Madonna and all. They mixed it in, and the audience hated it. The male audience, they don't want to hear that crap. They want to hear, they want to hear Guns N' Roses. And so I would say every morning, I said, oh, I'm so disappointed. Wimp Radio, they've just been taken over by all this new music. I was excited about moving here to listen to WPLJ, the famous rock station. What do I get? Wimpy Radio. And so I said, every morning I would turn the dial. You know how you go through all the dials. And I go, Wimpy Radio, WPL. We made jingles. And every morning when I tuned in, they were playing Debbie Boone, You Light Up My Life. Every morning. When I go through, let's see what they're doing this morning, see if they're going back to Guns N' Roses or whatever it was. And it goes, you, and I had it's filtered too. Oh, turn that off, Ross. Turn that off. I can't take that. So we just tarnished there. It was terrible. It was quite an experience.
well, you have done more in this business. I mean, we could be doing this forever, but I do want to talk about the day I got a phone call from
Right.
Mr. Scott Shannon going, there's a guy out near you somewhere. I was in the Bay Area at the time, but near you in Stockton, I don't know where he is, and he's got this name, True Oldies. I got to have that name. That was the name you were going to get one way or the other. I don't even know the entire story, but I said, I don't know who this is, but I'll try to track him down because True Oldies is now your baby, along with, of course, introducing the great Sean Hannity every single day. But True Oldies, the idea came to you, the name came to you.
I've always, like I said, I've always been a music fan. I was, none of my friends would go see the Beatles when we were in Indianapolis. I went by myself. They were doing an outdoor concert. I'm standing up on a chair surrounded by women, young girls, and you couldn't hear them singing. You couldn't hear them singing. And it was just I've always loved music. It's been a passion for me. And so what happened was radio abandoned all this great music. They quit playing it. I'm talking about the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, other than rock stations, but where are you going to hear
Temptations,
Motown? Where are you going to hear Motown? Four Tops, Temptations. Where are you going to hear Four Seasons? You don't have it. And you look at all the famous one-hit wonders. They're all over the place. So
right.
I think this might be 18 years ago. And I decided I just wanted to keep that music alive. And so I started the station, and we were with ABC Radio. And we had about I would say 50, 60 radio stations that just played that. And people were so excited because in the advertising business, they say nobody wants anybody. They don't want an audience over the age of 50, 54. And if you look around where you live, who's got all the freaking money? You know, when I'm in Florida, I live in a place, I'm the poorest guy in the joint.
Come on.
These guys are all driving, they're driving Lamborghinis, you know, beautiful Jaguars, all kinds of different cars. Oh, Bentleys. They got a lot of Bentleys. Excuse me. And so where are they getting them? Are they stealing them? No, they're buying them. So and as we get older, that ageism is going away. Because you say the new 75, the guy at 75 now looks like he's 65 and he's dating a girl who's 35 or 25. But they should be able to sell those numbers when they're older people. I've got stations that do it. People listen to us all around the world, to be honest with you, but mostly in America. I got you can pick us up on Alexa. If I say, Alexa, play the True Oldies channel, and we're distributed online by iHeartRadio. But for radio stations, we're distributed by LRN, Local Radio Network. They're out of Indiana, coincidentally. But we've got probably going on 40 different stations around the country, including New York. We're on 92.3 HD3, and it's the highest rated HD channel in the country.
I bet. Are you involved picking music, or do you have someone else?
Well, I have
handling?
input, but I have a guy that does the music,
You do?
and yeah, he's great music mixer. He's been doing it forever. His name is Gary Reynolds, and he's been with me from the start.
It's great.
And but he handled, I'm lucky to have him, and he is the ops manager, oversees it. We have a producer that produces my show. I'm on from 6 to 3 every day.
Wow.
Every day.
Is there any other jocks?
Yeah, there's one more.
Oh, wow.
Oh, we got two more. Another guy.
Oh, wow. I'm going to apply.
Todd Chambliss. I don't know about you.
I'm trying. I still talk up.
He can do it.
I can still talk up in the car,
Yeah, you got a good voice. It's good. When I first started radio, when I first got my job, I was in the Army. I got drafted. And I had tried to get a job, but I had to live in a town that was so big you couldn't go. You just can't, in Los Angeles, you couldn't go into KHJ. You didn't walk into WABC in New York and say, "Hey, you got anything open?" So what happened was, and I had to make, I had to make a living. I left home when I was 17 years old and was on my own, never went back. I had $40 when I left home. But what I was going to say is, when I got drafted, that put you, the Army posts are in smaller towns. So you can go by the station and knock on the door, and the DJ will answer if it's at night or the weekends. So I went, and when I was in Fayetteville, went by the little small station, WFBS Fayetteville, and I went by and I said, I went to say, "Yeah, you got any opens?" "Yeah, we got a weekend open." He said, "You got a tape you can play for me?" Well, I had to leave in kind of a hurry. I really didn't get a chance to make an air check, but I've had a lot of experience. Really? Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time. All I did was drive in my car and listen to WIFE and imitate the afternoon DJ, a guy named Jay Reynolds. And he'd go, Hey, everybody, it's the Jaybird driving you home on a fun, loving Tuesday afternoon. And I would imitate him in the car, like you did, talk up songs and all that. So the guy would say, "Well, let me get the guy in the air, and if you go in the production room and he'll start the tape, and you just talk." So I took some wire. Remember when you had the wire copy? I tear it off the AP machine and go in there and say, "Well, today, Jacqueline Kennedy, blah, 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 blah." You just would read it. And the guy said, "Yeah, all right. I think I can put you on Sunday morning." Perfect. I love it. So that's how that got started. But I didn't have an air check. I was never on the air.
Where did Dave go?
He retired.
He said, Dave, he just walked away.
You're gonna wrap it up.
that's
Oh, you better take over.
Oh no, I'm scared. Where did he?
I'll just play. What's the name of your show?
For the Record.
And that's it for the record for today.
Listen, I had to make
Tell us the truth.
I had a quick question from someone.
I was just closing it up for you.
No.
We're gonna get there.
We can't close it up. First of all, when you're talking about music, no one loves music more than Scott. He would call me, and he does call me from time to time.
Yeah.
No hello, nothing. He just blurts out the song as some obscure oldie, and I got to come up with the artist. And he has a few of those, but there's one song,
that
we gotta talk about because it's been a running gag.
You discovered a lot of songs. You probably have almost as many gold records as I do, but. He came up one day and said, "Are you playing the new Dickie? What's his name? Dickie." Remember that?
Yeah, Dickie Lee.
Dickie Lee.
And
Dickie Lee had a big hit called Patches.
He had a couple. He had a couple of hits. He had Lori. He had I Saw Linda Yesterday.
What's the subtitle for Lori? The Sweater Song.
Oh, wow. There you go. See, he's got me again.
He's on the label. When I was a kid, Rick, I would actually sit there and read the album cover every time I played it.
That's great.
I play it. And the same with, I'd look on both sides of the 45. I could sit in a room and somebody get their little box with a handle on it, and they'd hold the 45 up, and I could, without being able to read the letters, I can tell you what song it is. And I can tell you, I did it at a party one time just for, they said, "Well, I've heard you could do this. I'm going to challenge you." So they would hold it up. I'd see an RCA record, and if it was really worn, it'd have to be an Elvis song. And if it had a lot of words to it, it's probably "That's When Your Heartaches Begin." If it's 2 words, it might be "Hound Dog" or "Don't Be Cruel" if it's 3 words. She held one up. It was a yellow label, Fury Records, and I said, "Well, that's Wilbert Harrison, Kansas City, but you have it turned around backwards. You're showing me the B-side, and that is "Lean on Me," which is a different version. Really, "Listen, My Darling" was a real.
Was that Fury? You said Fury?
Yeah.
There's somebody else is on Fury. Don Gardner and Dee Dee Ford.
Yeah, they were on Fury too, but that was
I Need Your Lovin'. But the Dickie Lee story is just real, because this is the 30th anniversary, Scott. It was 1976 when Dickie Lee released this song, 9,999,999 tears. We played it at KFRC.
You're the only one. You're the only station that played it.
And Scott would call from time to time, and this is what I'd hear on the other end. "Hey, what? Duke, how's that Dickie Lee doing for you?" Huge. It's a monster. You got to get on this.
And he's the only guy that I ever knew that was that song. What was the song? It was cooking. What was the lady's cooking? What was the guy's name? Remember, you had another one. There's another song that I think you actually played, but it didn't work so well.
Uh,
You remember the runner-up to "Do You Want to Dance"? The follow-up.
the
Not
follow-up
only,
from Bobby Freeman.
yeah,
Betty Lou got a new pair of shoes.
not only did I memorize both sides. I know all the words. Betty Lou's got a new pair of shoes. Betty Lou's got a new pair of shoes. Betty Lou, wow, wow, wow.
Yep.
Betty
Betty
Lou
Lou's
got a
got a
new.
new pair.
Yeah.
I went to the shoe store. Anyway, how about the label? Since we're talking about labels, you remember that
Josie.
label?
Josie.
Very good, Josie, the big Josie label. But
You know how many people? You know how many people that's going to be watching this gives a flying flip about Betty Lou?
Yeah, you guys are really
you're
getting into
looking
it
at
now.
both of them. You're
See?
looking at both of
No,
them.
no, I'm looking at both of them.
Yes, that's correct. You are. Yeah.
All right. Any
I
other?
mean, we could do this for
No,
a
no, no.
long, long time.
The DJ wants to go. I can feel it
You're
here.
going to do it
Yeah.
without me if you keep going.
So, for the record, Scott, is there anything you want to say for the record? Anything, a
Perfect.
misconception or something?
No, I mean, I love what I do. And I believe if I had somebody it's in the room and wants to be in radio, you have to have a passion for what you do. You have to. You have to love it. People know that I love the songs that I play. The listeners understand that I have a passion. Somehow it communicates. And you have to be yourself. you can design features of yourself that you might be your primary features, but you should be a person. If I screw up, so I'm gonna come back and say, you know what? I made a big mistake. That didn't go to number 15. That went all the way to number 8. Why, I don't know, but I'll do that on the Oldies network.
Well,
It's being real. You can't fake it. You can't fake that stuff. And you said a lot right there.
Yeah, but most importantly, you have to have a passion, and you can't take yourself too seriously. You got to have fun. If you look at all the great morning men and afternoon guys like Don Steele, you have to project confidence.
Right.
You have to be sure of yourself, but not cocky. It's
real.
You have to be real. You have to have a heart. You have to be emotional.
And Scott Shannon of 2026 loves his business as much as you did as that little kid in Indianapolis. It hasn't changed, and that's the secret sauce. You can't make that up.
Yeah.
And Scott, we love you for coming on, and it's an honor.
Thanks.
and
Totally.
and it's a rarity that you do this, and we're blessed that we've been able to do it with you.
Well said. Well said, Rick.
Oh no, this is part one.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll have a couple of parts, but Scott Shannon, thank you. We've got we love you to hit that subscribe button. We've got that. This is For the Record, and anytime you have comments, let us know.
Thank you, Scott.